Funding for this program is provided by the Pennsylvania Department of Education for Learning at Home.
I'm Miss Unger, and today we are going to be doing some really fun and fascinating learning about light and sound. Sure, you see examples of light and sound all around you every day, but I think you are going to be amazed at the ways light and sound impact our world. You'll learn how sound waves reach your ears and how your eyes process light. You'll even learn how light and sound waves travel through different objects. You'll learn how people use sunlight and shadows to tell time, before the creation of clocks. We'll investigate different ways that light and sound create energy, and we'll do some really cool experiments by building circuits to explore how electrical current travels. We'll explore ways in which light and sound are used to create art, and we'll look back through history at the ways people used light and sound in order to communicate. Throughout all of these activities, you'll be reading, writing, thinking, questioning, designing, building, but most importantly, you'll be having fun. So let's get started. To do all of these activities, you're going to need to learn about the properties of light and sound. The properties of sound include how loud it is, how fast it travels, and its pitch. Pitch is the quality that lets us know if a sound is higher or lower. We'll also learn about sound as a form of energy and how that energy travels. Here's what I mean by sound energy. Sound is a type of energy made by vibrations. Sound waves are formed when a vibrating object causes a solid, liquid, or gas to vibrate too. And remember, because air is a gas, sound waves travel through the air as well. Many musical instruments make sounds when their strings are plucked. An instrument could be as basic as a cardboard box and a rubber band, or a guitar, or even the stringed instruments in an orchestra. As you investigate sound energy in this lesson, you'll get to test your ideas by designing a musical instrument of your own. We'll also learn about the properties of light. The three main properties are the speed in which it travels, its color, and the way light reflects. You'll also learn about bioluminescence, which is a big word that means a creature that can create and emit light. This is a superpower that some marine animals and insects have. You'll also learn about light as a source of energy and all the ways that this energy is used in our everyday lives. Humans use light energy from the sun too. In fact, light energy is how we power space stations and satellites. We also produce light energy using tools such as candles, lanterns, flashlights, and light bulbs. And here's a fun fact. Light energy is the only form of energy visible to the human eye. We cannot see sound waves, but we can see light waves. And you're going to get to conduct experiments with light, too, just like you did with sound. You can even experiment with solar energy yourself by creating your own solar oven. Use light energy to cook some of your favorite snacks, like s'mores. You can make a solar oven using a cardboard box, black paper, tinfoil, and plastic wrap. This solar oven uses light and heat emitted from the sun, and you'll determine how to use your materials to reflect the sunlight and trap the heat in order to cook your food. Now that is what I call a delicious discovery. All these activities will require you to use the same processes used by scientists. You'll make observations, form hypotheses, test your ideas, and communicate your findings. All the while, you'll be surrounded by exciting activities using light and sound. And the coolest thing is, you'll be using two of the most common and important tools that a scientist has: your eyes and your ears. So have fun!
Hey friends, I'm here to talk to you about the word civilization. The word civilization means a group of people who live together in a structured way of life. Light and sound have a lot to do with how civilizations developed and how they advanced. And the social studies activities we'll do will explore that. You'll investigate ways in which light has been used to provide heat and power, and how each new discovery has dramatically increased the way that we do business, work, and live. You'll also get to think about some pretty cool ways that sound was used to communicate messages and celebrate culture through music. We're going to start by taking a look at the different characteristics of civilizations. Throughout history, civilized societies were defined by certain features. For example, they had large population centers, a system of government, and a shared way of communication. Another characteristic of civilizations is a unique style of art. Art is a way for civilizations to express their identities, their opinions, and their values through images, sounds, and stories. Storytelling is one type of art, and we're going to talk about that style of art through the use of folktales. Folktales are stories that reflect a culture and its beliefs and customs. Folktales were usually passed on by word of mouth, but eventually they were written down. Lots of folktales from cultures from around the world involve the sun. The sun is our source of light and life, and people have been trying to understand that for millennia. In some folktales, the sun is considered a god. In others, it's considered a mischievous spirit. And even in others, it's considered a bad guy. Here are some examples. The indigenous people of Australia believed that the sun was a woman. They called her Sun Mother. And every day she would wake up in the east, light a fire, and carry that fire all the way across the sky until it was night. Then she would put her fire out, get in her cave, and go to bed, and that meant that all little children should go to bed too. And in Nigeria, they have a folktale where the sun and moon are married, and they actually live on Earth. They invite their friend Water over to their home, but Water doesn't come by himself. He brings the entire ocean and all of the sea creatures with them. It becomes so crowded that they have to move out. They are actually driven out, and they go up into the sky, and they look down on the earth, which was once their home. In the Philippines, they have a folk tale where the sun and moon are also married. But in this story, Mother Moon has to run some errands, and she leaves Father Sun home with the children. But she leaves him with specific directions. Do not get too close to the children because you will melt them. But being a father and loving his children so much, he couldn't help but want to hug and kiss his children, so he gets close to them and he gives them kisses. But when he does, they begin to melt. But they also begin to glow. But he's really worried because when Mother Moon comes home, she is so upset with him. But then she sees that her children are glowing. And then she realizes that that makes them even more beautiful. And that is how we have the sun, the moon, and the stars, which are their children, all up in the sky. If you had to create a folktale about the sun, what would your story be about? And what if I asked you to set that story to music? Just like folktales, folk songs reflect the culture and the civilizations that create them. These songs pass on important information and beliefs from generation to generation. And where there's folk music, you're pretty sure to find folk dancing as well. So many folk tales and folk songs exist, and you're going to have the opportunity to do them in many activities. In fact, you're going to get to enjoy a lot of things from these activities. So get set to share your bright ideas and make a lot of noise!
Start the lesson with a simple math sequence. 2 plus 2 equals what? 2 plus 2 equals 22, right? Of course not. 2 plus 2 equals 4, because math is all about using what you know to figure out what you don't know. And you already know the value of numbers. Because you know the value of the number 2, you know that 2 plus 2 equals 4. Basically, you're solving a puzzle. You're taking the pieces that you already know and thinking about them logically to solve the pieces that you don't know. And if something's missing, you make an educated guess. That's what scientists do with the scientific method. In this lesson, you're going to be decoding and encoding puzzles. That means you're going to be taking in clues from the world around you and using them to solve the problems. And math is the tool that'll help us do this. Math helps us see everything in the right proportions. Math helps us observe patterns. And since patterns are all around us, that means math is all around us too. For example, in music, there are symbols that tell us how long a note should be held. Some notes are longer, while other notes are shorter. Those different musical notes are a way of showing fractions. Should you hold a note for a full beat, or should you hold a note for a half beat? Those musical fractions add up to a song. Math is part of the visual arts too. Artists use geometry to incorporate shapes, symmetry, lines, and angles into the designs of their work. A Russian artist named Vasily Kandinsky is popular with mathematicians because of his use of patterns. He uses circles, squares, triangles, and lines. Patterns are an important element of problem solving because they help us to predict what comes next. And math is the language of science, the language we use to represent the patterns we see in our world. Have you ever seen a kaleidoscope? It's a toy that uses mirrors and pieces of colored glass or paper to create a repeating pattern. When you rotate the tube, the colored paper or glass reflects in the mirror, creating various patterns. You can see the patterns by looking through the lens at the bottom of the kaleidoscope. And math is also used for measuring. Some of our activities include measuring shadows and telling time. The sun is an important tool for measuring time. Do you remember how we made sundials in the science lesson? Why do you think our ancient ancestors invented sundials? And what do you think life would be like without a way to tell time? And why are things like sundials and now clocks so important to our daily lives? While you think about those big questions, you are going to get the chance to measure shadows and tell time, using nothing but shadows and the sun. And math, too, of course. You'll record your observations and describe why you think the shadows you measure are different lengths and go in different directions. And you'll look for patterns in your measurements, too. Here's another example of how you can measure time. Do you remember the solar oven experiment from our science lesson? Instead of cooking s'mores, you can do an experiment with ice cubes. Put one ice cube in the solar oven and leave one ice cube outside. Then measure how long it takes for both ice cubes to melt. Believe it or not, that simple experiment with the ice cube and the solar oven can actually help to explain why our planet is heating up and ice all around the globe is melting at a faster rate than it has in the past. There are lots of factors that can help explain our climate's change, but the plastic wrap on our solar oven helps to show a little bit of how this works. The plastic wrap traps the sun's heat, and that heat is what cooks our food. It's similar to the way that gases in the Earth's atmosphere are trapping the sun's heat. Gases act like the plastic wrap. They trap the sun's heat and they warm the Earth. It's a process called the greenhouse effect. A greenhouse is a glass building used to grow plants. The inside of a greenhouse stays warm because the glass walls and roof trap the sun's heat, even in the winter. This allows people to grow plants all year round, no matter the weather. By using math to measure the time that it takes for an ice cube to melt, you can learn more about why our planet's ice is melting. Maybe then you can use what you know to solve the puzzle of the greenhouse effect. Part of being a mathematician is being a detective. You are using your 5 senses, especially your sense of sight and sense of sound, in order to gain information from the world around you and use it to solve problems. And that brings us back to what I said earlier. You are using what you already know to figure out what you don't know. And every time you do that, you gain more knowledge to help you understand the world a little bit better. And I can't think of any puzzle more fun than that to solve.
Hey friends, you might be wondering what light and sound have to do with English language arts. But it has plenty to do with that, because today we're going to be studying about mass communication. And mass communication is the way that we actually communicate with people near and far. We'll begin by talking about how humans use light and sound to communicate. Mass communication is the term used to explain sharing information on a large scale to a wide range of people in different places. As civilizations developed, think about all the reasons why communication is important, not just for people who lived nearby, but also for people who lived far away. The telephone is a great example of sound technology that's able to connect people who are far away from each other. You're all familiar with the smartphone that we have now, but they are way different than the phone that Alexander Graham Bell invented back in 1876. And that was an invention that changed civilization. By 1918, there were over 10 million homes that had telephone service. And by 1927, the technology had grown so rapidly that people were able to actually make calls from New York to London across the Atlantic Ocean. In the decades that followed, rapid advancement in phone technology was able to improve phones to the point where we were able to have mobile phones. As a matter of fact, the first car phone was invented in 1946, and that phone weighed 80 pounds. For our modern phones, we have 2 men that we can thank for this technology. First, we have Dr. Henry Sampson. Dr. Sampson actually invented the gamma cell from which all of the cell phones are actually based upon to this day. And then we have Mr. Martin Cooper, who took Dr. Sampson's cell technology and created the cell phone that we are so familiar with. Humans have a need to know what's happening beyond their own communities. And the telephone is a great tool to help us connect and communicate to people both near and far. Mass communication is how we get the news we need to make decisions about our lives and our safety. How we learn and share discoveries, how we conduct trade and do business. It's also how we bond and connect with each other, because human beings are social creatures and we need that bond and that communication with one another. Imagine if you didn't have some type of device, a cell phone, a tablet, a computer to be able to reach out and connect with your friends. How would you feel? How would you react and respond in that type of situation? But what about before we had telephones? How did people communicate then? Throughout history, humans have communicated with each other in a variety of ways. They talked to each other in person, but that meant traveling to where the other person was. And that took time, and plus travel could be dangerous. However, As writing systems developed, they were able to write messages to each other. But that still took time and travel was still dangerous. It wasn't until the 1840s that an inventor utilized a coded alphabet that used a system of dots and dashes that sent messages along electrical currents from one person to another. But who came up with this alphabet? It was actually an inventor by the name of Samuel Morse. He came up with the alphabet and he called it Morse code. Well, Morse code can utilize light and sound because if you utilize sound, it's a system of dots and dashes, and the dots can be like this quick sounds. And then the dashes are longer intermittent sounds like. And similarly with lights, you can flash a light on and off, and that's like a dot. Or you can flash a light, leave it on for a half a second, and then turn it off, on for half a second, turn it off, and those will be considered dashes. Eventually, those signals were sent through an invention, again by Samuel Morse, called the telegraph. The person receiving the message at the other end could write down those dashes and dots and decode it on the receiving end. Mr. Morse sent the first Morse code message in 1844, and that message went from Washington, D.C. to Baltimore, Maryland. Remember how we talked about how important mass communication was? Well, that message sent in 1844 by Mr. Morse was so important for mass communication because it was the first time in human history that a message could be sent and received almost instantaneously, and that actually changed the world. So we've been spending all this time talking about how humans communicate using light and sound, but animals utilize light and sound for communication as well. An example that you're probably really familiar with is the firefly, or where I come from, we call them lightning bugs. A firefly is a winged beetle that has an organ on its abdomen that produces light. Fireflies communicate using the language of light. They flash a blinking pattern, and that's how they find a mate or signal each other in some way. And you're going to be doing some cool activities to help you understand how that helps them survive. Great inventions come from creativity and courage. The best inventions, however, come from trying to solve a problem or help other people. And you won't know if your invention is successful until you make it. So friends, you're going to learn about language in a whole new way, and I know you're going to love it.
To download the free lesson plans to be used with this program, visit us online at wqed.org/SOS. To request a hard copy of the lesson plans, please contact your local school district. Funding for this program is provided by the Pennsylvania Department of Education for Learning at Home.